Hello and welcome to the Wine Educate podcast, where we explore WSET education, study tips, and practical advice for wine enthusiasts and professionals. I'm your host, Joanne Close. This is episode 25, and I have returned from our first ever Level 3 boot camp in the south of France. I've just about recovered from the old jet lag. It takes a while for me to get over jet lag when I come back because I'm naturally a morning person. But if you wake up at 3 in the morning every day, that's really sort of still the middle of the night. So I've been working on it. I think I got up at 6 today. Good. So I'm like back on track. So I wanted to let you know a little bit about what we did over the last week and why I put together this trip in the first place, what I hope to achieve, and what I think I did achieve. I was really very pleased with it. And I'm going to talk a bit about the lessons from the vineyard, both the viticulture and the vinification. We'll talk a little bit about the viticulture lessons, just a few of them. They were many. I'm going to cover 3 of them, 3 notable ones, and then also tie them into a level 3 essay question and how they link together, how doing a trip like this with sort of a level 2 student thinking of going into level 3, or a level 3 student who has yet to sit the exam or maybe is going to be retaking the theory. It's a super helpful exercise actually having these things in front of you and having all the pieces connect. Now, you don't have to go to the south of France to have these lessons be learned. If you have any sort of vineyard near you, I really highly encourage you to go, even if it's just for the day. You live in Texas, there's some wineries there. Certainly California, and other parts far flung in the world, to just maybe try and go for a weekend. And the light bulbs that go off just from being on a vineyard for even a day are tremendous and will really help you all with linking this immensely dense book and all of its information into more practical applications. Okay, so Chateau Campbells is in the Languedoc, and the climate is warm Mediterranean. I usually go in the summertime. It can get quite hot in the summertime. And I have to say, being there the first week in March was lovely. It is hard to go tromping around vineyards when it's like 95 to 100 degrees outside, okay? So the weather was much more amenable for us to be poking around and staying outside and walking around. The climate is warm Mediterranean, but Campbells is on top of a hill. So you get a little bit of elevation happening. So it can cool down quite a bit more at night than it does, say, further down, closer to the beach area. And of course, this is one of the things we learn about in level 3, this diurnal shift, and you really get to experience that. There are also 13 different winds in this area. Don't panic. For level 3, you just need to know the 2, right? What are the 2 winds? The mistral and the tramontane. So the mistral comes in from starting in the northern Rhone, right? And it blows through the southern Rhone and down to the Languedoc, and certainly we feel it. And then the tramontane, which comes in from the gap between the Massif Central and the Pyrenees. So if you've ever been driving on I think it's the A9, driving up to Carcassonne, and the tramontane is in full effect, it is wild. That has happened a few times where we just had to get off and take the back roads because the car was just lurching around. The winds are very, very intense. So being in a climate and having studied it, it's just so immensely helpful. You feel the winds. My gosh, it's always so very windy, and get to experience just being in the vineyard at a certain time of year. So normally I am there in the summer and the grapes are going through a veraison process. But having been there the first week in March, the vines have just been pruned. They are bare. They haven't started their cycle once again. And it's just really lovely to be there at a different time of the vine cycle. So how would all of this kind of tie into an essay question? All right, so the essay question: why is a Mediterranean climate well suited for producing organic wines? So if you have the opportunity to pause right here and have a go at answering this yourself, that's great. If you're driving or whatnot, don't. Maybe just think in your own mind how you may answer this question. And here's a possible answer. Low rainfall and winds to dry the vines means that there is low disease pressure, reducing the need to spray the vines. And this is very true. So if you experience that quite intense wind, it blows through the vines and it just dries everything up really quickly, so that extra moisture does not have the time to really set in and cause all of these mildew issues that can happen in more maritime climates, right? Okay. The second lesson from the vineyard, and this was just so fun. There is a tower at Campbell's Ends. It's built above the barrel room. So you climb on up to the top and you get full panoramic views. There's big glass windows on all four sides, and you can really see a good majority of the vineyard and the vines. And as I mentioned, it's March, so there's no leaves on the vines, and you can see the trunks themselves, but you can see the soil, right? You can really get an understanding of just how varied all the different soil types are here. And they look completely different. We have a lot of limestone, but we also have some clay and some gravel. And you can see white patches and turning into sort of tan. And then some look even slightly reddish. And Leandro was showing us one of the parcels of Syrah. It's probably the largest parcel of Syrah that we have. And you can see it almost looks like a little, not to be cliche, but it looks like a patchwork, like a quilt with all the different soil types there. And they actually harvest all those patches separately. So even though it's one big parcel, they take the time to harvest what they deem to be the separate soil types separately, so they can vinify them separately and add more complexity to the wines. Also from the tower, if you look out, if it's a clear day, you can see the Pyrenees and you can see the snow on top of the Pyrenees. We saw a little bit of snow because it's still there. You could see the Mediterranean. And on the other side, you can just about make out the Black Mountains, which is the northern part of the Languedoc lies. So you really get a good view of everything. So one of the areas is all the white grapes. So we are predominantly red because of the climate, right? Red grapes prefer warmer climates, but we do have some white grapes. We have some Viognier and Grenache and some Bourboulenc. It took me a while to figure out how to say that, but Bourboulenc. So those are all planted in the same area. And it's more of a low-lying area and therefore ends up being slightly cooler. And the white grapes prefer this slightly cooler area. But one of the drawbacks of this is that very occasionally, and it's happened recently, we can get a little bit of frost. And this was a bit surprising to me because I thought, why we get frost? This is a warm Mediterranean climate. This is not to be expected. However, because we are a little higher and we have that elevation, so you get cooler temperatures at night. And then this area in particular, even though it's up, is in a sort of a dip, a lower lying area. So on a cooler night in the spring, the cooler air will pool down to this slightly lower lying area where the Viognier is planted, and it affected the vines. About 5% of the vines were affected by frost, which is remarkable to me. But if you go out in that section of the vineyard and you walk, you can actually feel the dip. You can feel yourself going a little bit lower, and it helps cement that concept that the cooler air is heavier and therefore flows down and finds that lowest spot, which is the frost-prone area. So how would this manifest itself in an essay question? Okay. A vineyard is being planted in a frost-prone area. Name 2 things that could be done during vineyard layout and planting to help mitigate frost. So before you dive in and answer this essay question, I just want to point out, and since I have to say this a lot, but it's crucial that you make sure that you're answering what the question is asking, right? So they're asking what you would do to mitigate frost if you were planting a vineyard, not if the vineyard was already planted, because I know, we want to go start talking about smudge pots and sprinklers and all that, but that is not what the question is answered. So I'll read it one more time. A vineyard is being planted in a frost-prone area. Name 2 things that can be done during the vineyard layout and planting to help mitigate frost. And there are more than 2 things you could say, but go with your strongest 2. And here are some ways this could be answered. You could select a late budding grape variety to avoid early spring frosts. You could use a high trellising system to mitigate the effects of ground frost, so essentially lifting everything up to escape low-lying frost. Plant on hillsides and avoid low-lying areas where frost can accumulate. And finally, you could have said, remove trees, bushes, or buildings, remove the building, that could block airflow and trap frost. Okay? So those are all 4 possible answers. You only needed 2, and always go with your strongest 2. All right. The third and final lesson for the purposes of this episode is going to touch upon climate change and grape varieties. So we were in the Roussillon, just south of the Languedoc, and we were talking to some winemakers about what was happening. And it's warmer down there. They have a lot of Grenache that they plant, right? Grenache likes the warm weather. They also have some Syrah, some Carignan, but many of them are experimenting with more grape varieties that are even more heat and drought resistant. We have been there some points during the summer and seen a vigneron frantically flipping through their address book, sitting at the bar having a cigarette and trying to figure out how to get people to come and pick the grapes because it is just too hot and the grapes need to be brought in. So it is a real issue. Even though you have these grapes that are resistant to heat and drought, they are experimenting with ones that are even more so. So what would that be? Assyrtiko. It was interesting to hear. So Assyrtiko is a grape indigenous to Greece, and you have a lovely picture of Assyrtiko in your level 3 book. It's that vine that looks like a little basket, low to the ground, tightly woven together because it is so windy there and hot. And they are experimenting, planting this grape, which I thought was fascinating. Okay, so here is an essay question for you. How are vines trained in La Mancha and why? All right, so we know La Mancha is in Spain and its climate is hot continental. Think of poor Don Quixote riding across La Mancha. It is hot. So, how would the vines be trained? trained low to the ground to prevent evaporation and protect from winds, spaced far apart so they don't compete for the limited water resources. I hope this is helpful to you all to see the link between practical vineyard experiences and applying them to these level 3 essay questions. I got back from the trip and had a little look at my calendar. Of course, you guys know I did this trip during Mardi Gras. So I thought, okay, when's Mardi Gras for 2026? Oh, it's in February, like middle of February. And that is just too cold to be going to France that time of year. It is very windy then. The days are really short. So I am going to push it back. And I noticed that Easter is April 5th. So that's when it's going to be. So the 2026 boot camp is going to be April 6th to April 11th. And I have that now posted on our website. So if you want to go visit wineeducate.com and look for the trips link, and you can read all about the trip. I am going to limit this to 12 people because if the group is too large, it's hard to move around too much. And I want us to see lots of things. All right, next episode on Thursday, I'm going to talk some more about some of these practical examples at the vineyard. Until then, have a great fun.